welcome to episode number 21 of your favorite YouTube series and ours as well, Not Another Demo. Episode 21, I think that means we're old enough to drink. So I didn't bring anything other than water, but maybe next time. So episode 21, that's pretty exciting stuff. With me today, Aaron, Lloyd, and Anthony from the Really Bad Security crew. Really excited this week to have Recorded Future with us. Recorded Future was a sponsor of our February event. Tons of positive feedback. People had lots of questions. So we really wanted to have them in and have a deeper conversation with them. So with us, we have Kathleen, Kuczma, and Holden from Recorded Future. So I am going to, Chris, I'll pass it over to you. If you could start, maybe the two of you could give a brief introduction. And then the first question I always like to ask is, you know, at a time where everyone, I feel, is busier than we've ever been, and for some reason 2021 feels incredibly busy, why would someone, or why would a company carve out an hour of their time to talk with Recorded Future?
Sure. Yeah, I'll get started. It's super to be here. Thank you for having us on. Very exciting. My name is Holden. I run the intelligence services team at Recorded Future, it's effectively all of the things that we do with our customers. So product support, training, education, enablement, all of those things. Why don't I hand it over to Kathleen real quick to do the quick intro, and then I can answer the question that you posed.
Sounds great. Absolutely.
Perfect. Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Kathleen Kuczma. I'm a sales or a solutions engineer with Recorded Future. So what that means for me day to day is doing personalized demonstrations or workshops or proof of values, what we call POV. And I was supposed to spell out acronyms to really show how Recorded Future can help a variety of different use cases. Again, personalized demos, that's really my main day to day. With that, I'll pass it back over to Chris to answer your question first.
Look at that. She's winning the acronym.
I've watched some videos, make sure I
like
I could get tripped up.
And I forgot to lay down the ground rules, but we're episode 21. I figure everyone knows, but for those that don't, the ground rules are no acronyms, no marketing jargon. Let me rephrase that. If we use an acronym, explain it once, and then we can go back to using the acronym, because we know why there's acronyms, because some of those words are horrible to use. So anyways, sorry. Chris, back to you.
All good. We didn't break the rules yet, so it's a good start. Yeah, so Recorded Future is an intelligence company, and we serve security organizations and teams and individuals. And so short way to answer the question that you posed is, the belief is that that threat out there in the world today, particularly in cybersecurity, is evolving as fast as ever. Sort of like the surface area is more multidimensional than ever for businesses. The capabilities for criminals or threat actors is more diverse than ever. And intelligence provides an opportunity to equalize the playing field a little bit for organizations and teams. And then also, in terms of spending some time with us, I think one of the other exciting opportunities that we feel intelligence provides is to provide for an opportunity for businesses and teams and security organizations around the world to account for some of the skills gap that exists. And if intelligence can facilitate some of the things, and whether it's automation or just regular workflows that you might otherwise have to staff a bunch of people for, that we're all struggling to find those people, ourselves included, struggling to find those people, because there's not that many of them. For the jobs that are out there, if we can provide something that creates efficiencies or plugs some gaps that otherwise we've been reliant or trying to use humans for, that sort of rises all boats on the tide, right?
So before we talk about the use cases of of intelligence, let's take a step back and talk about the sources, right? Because your intelligence is only as good as where you get it from. So can you speak to where Recorded Future gets their intel, how it's collected, how frequently those possible stale records are updated, things of that nature?
Yeah, sure.
I can. I didn't know if I can take that. Actually,
sure.
Recorded Future's collection capability was really one of the first things that got me excited to actually join Recorded Future as a sales engineer. First time in a role that has sales in the title. since my own background was intelligence analysis in the government. So I got very used to having a lot of data and being used to knowing how to actually interpret that data and actually make that actionable. So coming to Recorded Future and seeing how we were collecting more than 900,000 sources across your dark web, where we have sometimes bots and crawlers, obviously, in these higher tier forums. We have our INSICT group team. That's our internal threat research team. INSICT stands for insight in Swedish, or means insight. So have a good combination of the dark web collection piece, being able to scan GitHub or other code repositories for leaked code. And then more on the networking side, having network traffic analysis to know, within minutes, hey, this IP address of yours is an active C2 server. Here's the malware family. Here's how much is actually being exfiltrated and the last day we saw it active. So it's really combining, the closed sources that people really wouldn't have access to, or it takes a long time to build up that access. And also your typical open source as well, with covering some social media and security blogs, right? With the F5 stuff that's come out, we would be collecting on that and seeing what security researchers are saying. So it's really a combination, but obviously the highest value would be those sources you don't have access to day to day.
So Chris, you mentioned that having the intelligence can help with either the skills gap or just a lack of people gap. Kathleen, you talked about the vast quantity of intelligence and information that you guys are gathering. So to me, that says there's a ton of intelligence out there, and I maybe don't have the people to be able to sort through that. So I have a Recorded Future. How do you guys help sort through all the noise then that's out there, right? Because if we're just getting tons of threats, like how do you work through what's real, what's active, what isn't, to help the fact that we don't have the resources to be able to do that ourselves?
Yeah. So part of the core of what we've been doing for almost 12 years now is taking all of, like, you kind of take some of the pieces together, and then also work on the distinction between like trying to chuck a bunch of information at people and then offering something that could be consumed as intelligence that you could actually action and work on. But at the core of it is basically we've been doing this large scale collect of data from all over the place. Kathleen described a lot of the source inputs. And then before just kind of sucking that all into one place and then pushing it back out to an operator, part of our responsibility and what we've taken on is to package all of it up, whether there's replication in the data and we want to merge things together, or there's context that we can provide along with like a single bit of information that if you were on the receiving end of that, you could be like, I see, like it's not just like a bad IP address, this is why it's bad, or this is why, like how recently it's bad, or this is what malware family it belongs to. Some information that helps create efficiency in the process that you are ultimately going to run as a human being. And the packaging is some of the core part of it. It's like, okay, we get all of this massive set of input and raw collect from various places. You want to mash it up in a way that's meaniful. I'm trying to avoid the marketing part. Right? You want to match, like,
very
really,
good, because you
want
have a tough crowd.
It's meaningful, and if possible, you'd like to create some analytic value on the output for an analyst or for an operator or for a manager or a senior executive, right? And if you can put the packaging around it in such a way, then it's not just like another whole pile of alerts of something out there, but you actually get some wrapper around it. You get some context on your alert or what you're looking up or whatever it may be. And that allows you to create a more efficient and informed decision versus just having to do another set of 50 decisions from some other place, right?
I want to back it up just a little, and I'll build on the question that Anthony asked. So Anthony was like, hey, where did this data come from? I'm going to start even before that. What are like the must-have capabilities or resources, that a company should have in place already before investing in a threat intelligence platform, right? Because one of the things that I have to be mindful, and Lloyd has to be mindful in the healthcare system is we're not a Fortune 500 company. Right. We don't have unlimited funds. Right. Our CISO has to go to the board every year with one of our directors, and basically beg for money. Fortunately, we have a great board that understands there's value of security, but still, when you get that spend, do you guys have like a playbook or advice to where you should have these things in place before you even use our solution, so that you're already putting it, you're already a step ahead, so to speak, before you even get to the point where you're ingesting some of the reporting that your guys are doing?
Yeah, I can take that, especially from when I started Recorded Future in 2018. As you said, for the most part, Recorded Future and cyber threat intelligence, or CTI, had been really marketed for, as you said, Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies. And when I first started Recorded Future, new to the sales engineering role, I was talking to a lot of smaller commercial sized companies. So how could we work with a team that maybe just has one or two people? They have one user who is in charge of, maybe they just brought on a SIM, and SIM stands for Security Incident Event Management. I don't spell out SIM often.
That's one of those ones why we have
That's why we have acronyms.
Yep. Those are horrible words to put together.
Yes, exactly. So able to actually talk to these teams, right? One or two people, for them, having actionable intelligence within, let's say, a Splunk or QRadar, a logarithm, something that has time-saving value, is very easy to pass up along to, right, your leadership. Or if people don't want you to save time, saving time saves money, right? That becomes a pretty easy sell when we're just enhancing what tools or platforms that a team already has, especially if it's only one or two people, right? Really expanding how much that person can do in their day-to-day. And I think from a manager perspective, they probably want to make their one or two analyst jobs a little bit easier. So I've seen, the full gamut of 20 users who have access to the platform. They're in day-to-day doing threat hunting, YAR rules, snort rules. And I've worked with the one-person security team who is primarily working within their security operations center, their SOC, out of a SIM, and we're saving them a lot of time. So I've seen both.
I don't think I explained correctly. What are the minimum tool requirements that a business has to have in place to be able to actually take action? So I'm a brand new startup. Mm-hmm. I just set up my website in AWS. I'm using PayPal for the invoice and everything else. So I don't even have the tools yet, but I know from a branding perspective, and I'll talk to that in a minute, that I want some threat intelligence. So is there a minimum amount of tools or a minimum amount of work that I have in place to be able to take action on the intelligence that you give me? I think does that make more sense?
No, it does. And maybe I'll loop in what I was saying, actually answer your question of, I've worked with companies who they technically don't have a log aggregator yet. So that's where a user can use our browser extension over any type of tool, or even just information that they're gathering, to prioritize indicators based on a risk score. So I've seen anything from not having an actual tool in place to having a lot of different tools in place, whether it's a SOAR platform, a security orchestration automation response platform, or it's maybe you're a third-party risk team and you are using like a ServiceNow, for instance. So I've seen the full gamut. And then if it's more brand focused, maybe Holden can talk about kind of how we help from like a brand perspective, where you don't have to have any tools in place to be able to find type of squad domains or leak credentials and actually action those.
Cool.
What are some ways that you see like the pitfalls? So, you're helping them consume that information, but then maybe they're just not connecting it back right, or they're missing the point on the threat intelligence, or, the intelligence for security. I think we said it earlier, which I really love that phrase. So what are some of those pitfalls you see as people try to consume that, especially in those smaller commercial organizations?
Yeah, in terms of common pitfalls I've seen is sometimes people are really they've had a system before, right? They're used to not having a lot of data at their fingertips and are used to going out to a lot of different sources. They have a process in place, and maybe they think, I don't need to speed this up. I'm doing okay today. I would say that's one common pitfall. I didn't run into it a ton, especially when working on more of the commercial space, but that's definitely has come up of like, well, nothing's really broken, but that's where it comes into the efficiency play and helping and being a part of the maturing process of a company. So whether they then add a SIM, okay, now we'll send our data directly into the SIM. You didn't have that before, but now we will. So it's a real progression.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's where I like that intelligence for security. Yeah, it is a marketing phrase that I like, because
Nice, we'll relay it.
you know, if I think of like threat or threat intelligence, that to me that seems like a sea that is going to take me forever to try to comb through. But if we're talking about giving me information and intelligence to help me be better at doing security, well, that sounds like that's usable to me, right? Then I'm getting this mountain of information that maybe I can't do anything with. I mean, we've had those conversations with some of the SIM providers that we've talked to, right? Because as well, right? Because I think sometimes, you know, we collect logs from everywhere and we don't do anything with them. And so then what do we, you know, we just have this like sea of data that doesn't do us any good. So
I think more so in terms of like tools as a prerequisite, while there's certainly value in having like an existing ecosystem and you want to plug Intel into one of those existing workflows or tools, I think more so than tools, and to speak to the pitfalls question, is like if you don't have an intent behind your acquisition of Intel, whether it's from us or someone else, that's where things get pretty murky. If someone got hit with the like, go do threat intel, and they're like, okay, I'm on it, and off they go, and they buy something, and they're like, I got the threat intel. Okay, what are your requirements? What is the business trying to accomplish? How does this fit into that? Like, even if you boil it down to something that most, even the smallest teams will probably pay attention to, which we were talking to before the recording started, which is about how should I think about this vulnerability that just popped in the news? Like, does it matter to me? How should I talk to my boss about it, or my boss's boss, or my board? And if you go boil down all the way to like a simple requirement, like I would like to apply intelligence to better facilitate my patch prioritization or my remediation process, or how I look at any given vulnerability that's out there as it relates to my system. Sure, it would help to have like a technology that you do good asset inventory for, and you can map what the CVEs are that are exposed on your systems. But even absent that, you could still say, I know that the thing that is most important to us is managing our web application vulnerabilities, because we have something there that if that gets popped, we're in trouble. The brand will take a hit, our customers will be affected. Like, there's some bad outcome from a business perspective. And if you can use that as like a guiding light, then you're less likely to get sort of sucked into a pit that seems impossible to manage versus like buying it for a system even, right?
checking a checkbox and then not doing anything else with it.
Right? Or you get it and then you're like, now I have all these things, like there's too many paths and might choose my own adventure, right? but if instead I'm like, I want to focus on making a more effective vulnerability prioritization process. Okay, that's like a discrete solvable problem that we can apply intelligence to. Or I want to input a machine process into one of my automation workflows because I do phishing triage all the time. And I want to be able to understand what some of this telemetry is from an external perspective, and I can fit that into like a process so I can improve efficiency and detection. Like, okay, pretty reasonable set of requirements there to approach, right?
Kathleen, are you seeing in your interactions with the smaller businesses that they're starting to understand the importance of like protecting their brand? Because a lot of times I think when you think about like security intelligence, threat intelligence, you know, like you pointed out, you think of Fortune 100 and I have corporate secrets to protect and everything else. But everybody knows that the true lifeblood of the country are those small and medium businesses. And, you know, West Michigan, we have a bunch. We have Dematic and Steelcase and Herman Miller, and the list goes on. Are you starting to see these companies understand the importance of protecting their brand and understanding how to look for defensive domains and, you know, who's spoofing you in DMARC and stuff like that?
Yeah, I would say since starting about 2.5 years ago, more often than not, people do understand the benefit. It was actually only recently I talked to a few analysts, and they totally understood why he was worried about typo squad domains, about potential emails being sent out on behalf of suppliers that were going to make their overall brand look bad. So that was easy to sell to him. But I hadn't run into this in a while, but when we did the full demo, right, very personalized, we showed exact typo squads of their domain, the manager didn't really see why he should care as much, which hasn't happened as often. So I was a little thrown off when that happened within the last few months. But that's when it honestly does come to me, to Record Future in general, for some education as well, saying, hey, right, this is why if one of your like top clients, for instance, got phished by, like, let's say it's a fake invoice, how that could be damaging and actually equal monetary damage. So overall, yes, I think people are understanding the value. Once in a while, still have a little bit more education to do, but that's also part of my day-to-day.
No, that's good. I mean, that's hopeful, right? Like, I want smaller businesses to understand the importance of that brand security. And as you know, it's not really hard to do.
Right.
Well, one of the
Sometimes we
things
overcomplicate it.
you know, I mean, one of the things that we've talked a lot about lately, right, is that a big company is probably going to survive. It might cost them some money. It might cost them some, you know, I mean, we're still shopping at the same giant retailers that got, you know, hit hard a few years ago. They're still around. Smaller and medium-sized companies, you might not be, right? I mean, you know, it's maybe even more important in that space sometimes, because a big breach in a medium-sized company might be the end of the company. So, so you guys are gathering all of this information and you're dispersing it out to your customers. Is there an, man, what's the word to use here? Is there a relationship like between the customers and Recorded Future? Are you sharing information back and forth? Does that create kind of a community of threat intelligence or security intelligence? Well, I guess, how does it look like from that standpoint?
I'll take that one to start. Yeah, so I think twofold is probably the answer right now. So one, we actually started up a user community for our customers. That's basically part of the experience when you work with Recorded Future. You have access to this set of operators that work on Recorded Future. We started that up maybe meaningfully like 6 months ago, and we have about 1,200 people that are in that community. So it's not huge, but it's a decent sized group of security practitioners that are together and it's just Slack based. It's not like fancy or anything, right? Sure. But they are there together. And then I think the other way the community aspect works, there's not something natively built into the product where someone can be like, hey, I want to push this out to all the people in the world that use this. But where we tend to see the community experience play out is that in my group, we have individuals. The titling is consultant, but it's a group of people with some blend of security and intelligence background that work with small portfolios of our customers directly. And they just, like, every day they're immersed in hearing like successes, challenges, like what's working in financial services and what's working in small businesses in the Midwest and the US, and what's working for someone in Singapore. And they're able to bring that back home to the team here. And we routinely distribute and communicate best practices that we come across in different industries and different functions. I think that's really had a good impact on the larger group, where it's like, hey, we're hearing here and here that the healthcare companies in the Northeast are worried about a particular ransomware threat. Like, let's bring that home. Let's package up what we hear across the globe in terms of that interest and make sure that that gets pushed out to all of our customers in some way, right? So that they have awareness and they can act on it together.
Yeah, I like that, because I do feel like oftentimes, and I know it's, security, right? There's some stuff we can't share with each other or whatever, sure. But we talk a lot about being stronger together than we are separated, and why everybody seems to be going down the same path. So I think any sort of communication or shared knowledge as far as this stuff goes is really good. And
thinking about that shared knowledge, something I see is, we've mentioned a lot about the SOC and threat management, that kind of stuff, prioritization, but it'd be interesting to see, like, something like Recorded Future. Could it be consumed by other areas of your security program. So like risk, for example, when you submit a risk exception, a lot of times, at least in my experience, maybe it's different elsewhere, that they're more qualitative. They're just describing it, but there's not really a scoring with it. And, it's trying to relate that risk exception to some sort of quantitative measure. And I could see something like Recorded Futures providing input into that, having that partnership with the SOC and your vulnerability teams to kind of score in addition to the qualitative and a risk exception. So do you see like, other departments other than like SOC, for example, consuming this information?
Yeah, I can start maybe, and then Kathleen, I'll quickly hand it over to you. Yeah, I think, and not to back too far out of the question, but I think when we came into this talking about threat intelligence versus this idea of intelligence for security, is that, I think 5 years ago, people were like, threat intel, that's the job of a handful of people in a handful of big companies. And what they do is they put together gigantic reports over months, and like off that goes one day, and then they go back to like digging around and rooting around and doing investigations. And then to bring it back here, like, yeah, in short, we do routinely work with teams in GRC, in some of the physical risk teams even. So it does get out from beyond the security operations, incident responders, and even some of those threat intel cells in companies, to kind of go across the whole spectrum of security teams. And on third-party risk in particular, what we've been doing more and more work in that space over the last, 18 months or so. And we do have a scoring mechanism that maybe Kathleen can talk a little bit about the details, but the way that that's being consumed is not necessarily by the GRC teams alone, but it's actually facilitating dialogue between the security team or the intel, whoever is responsible for the intel piece. And they're able to go and say, hey, like, I've got this readout and some of the risks associated with the potential partner that we're going to do business with. Let's open up. Here's what I see from my standpoint. Let's marry that up with some of the qualitative stuff that you all do in terms of your surveys and your assessments. Yeah. And like, let's have a smarter outcome from it, right? Mm-hmm. Kathleen, I don't know if you add to that.
Yeah, the only thing I would add, and did we say an acronym did we say GRC without explaining what that was? I couldn't remember.
Oh, we might have. Governance, risk, and compliance.
Yeah, sorry.
I got that one. Look at me.
Yeah, and in terms of, you said, applying some sort of tangible risk score. So as Holden mentioned, we are providing risk scores that are updating in near real time for IP addresses, domains, hashes, URLs, vulnerabilities, and then companies. And then we're going into more of the physical security space. We're also providing risk scores for cities. But because our data is also available via an API, so let's say you have a homegrown system. I was working with a company in Canada, and they just wanted the data. They wanted to create their own risk matrix of, I want the risk score for a company. I want the risk score for all associated CVEs associated with this company as a part of their own mechanism to say, hey, how does this risk apply to us? And combining a few different disciplines. So that's where, whether we plug in directly into a pre-built GRC platform like a ServiceNow or an Archer, or a vulnerability management solution like also ServiceNow, for instance, we also have the ability where clients are using our data in custom workflows to say, hey, I just want this piece. I want this risk rule. I only want CVEs, for instance, that have been recently exploited in the last 7 days. So there's a lot of flexibility too for how you can use the data. And obviously our goal is to tell you, based on your own problems and your workflows, how we think you could help apply that.
Are you doing that with like a JSON REST API so you could slice and dice it however you want?
Yep. So it is a REST API, and the output's available in a few different ways, whether it's JSON, Python 2.7 or 3, URL curl. So we have a lot of different, pretty easy pre-built commands that if you already have the scripting skills that you can, and you have API access to Recorded Future, you can then build some of these.
I'm so impressed that a company was asking for that kind of detail to slice and dice it themselves.
I was too. I was like, wow, I haven't really come across this use case before, but that helps me. Also, we're trying to figure out, okay, I haven't come across this before. It's kind of a unique ask. And that's where I think, going to the first question, right? Why would you spend time with Recorded Future? Me or my colleagues who are going to be that first technical phase that you see from Recorded Future, We do not live to do canned demos, right? This is going to be as personalized as we can for the client, because I don't want to waste my time. I don't want to waste your time. And that's where, right, if we can do it, we'll talk to you and talk it through, but we'll also be honest and say, wow, it's very a niche use case. We don't do that, but maybe, like, I know you had Sneak on the other day, right? They do something very specific. Like maybe
but I mean, there's power in saying we're not ready for a good fit. And I was fortunate enough to, when I had Alan on the holiday special for the podcast, that's something he pointed out. He's like, not every company is ready to ingest threat intelligence. Sometimes it's just as important to understand that you're interested and you want to know, but maybe you're just not quite ready. So again, that's where I'm more impressed that you had a company that was willing to take it on themselves.
So you talked a little bit about like integration with the GRC platforms. How about the rest of the security world out there? Ecosphere. This word keeps popping in my mouth, and I want to get it out of there, but there isn't any others.
Ecosphere.
Ecosphere.
That's a horrible word. Anyways, like, as far as to give a security company, I always like to help companies look at kind of their bigger security picture and all the different things that they have and how things are communicating with each other. So can you guys talk a little bit about where Recorded Future fits into, say, the endpoint, the SIM, all the other spaces around the security stack?
I can take that first.
You want to start? I can.
Sure. So in terms of really fitting in, this is where obviously my role as a sales engineer is to see all of the different use cases, things we can do. So whether you just bought a SOAR platform and you haven't really been using it, for instance, right? How can we mention our pre-built playbooks that we can have for phishing, for leak credentials, for threat hunting, to be very specific to that company? And then also more a part of, this goes into Holden's team for the actual dedicated intelligence services resource, is doing what we call an architecture review. So here is the map of all the different technologies you have, from your SIM, vulnerability management, your endpoint solutions, right? Where's that data flowing? And then what are the different connection places Recorded Future can connect into? And have it be a phased approach. So whether you first start off within the SIM, further down the road, you want to actually start doing more with automation. So we can visualize and show you exactly like where we think Recorded Future would best fit in the workflow, and then put it back on the client to say, hey, this is what we want now. This would be a phase 2 or an ideal state. Not sure if I missed anything there, Holden.
No, in terms of technical capability to fit into other systems, we've designed our APIs to be agnostic, and the data output to be agnostic. So you can kind of talk through the spectrum of technologies, but Kathleen mentioned most of them already, whether you're using an incident response ticketing system or you're using some sort of SIM or a threat intelligence platform, or name them. The data output is flexible enough to play in any of those technologies. I think it kind of comes, really, the rubber hits the road when you come back to what I mentioned before, is what are you trying to do with it, right? If you're in your SIM, are you trying to do actual detection of bad, or are you trying to speed up and have better context around the workflow you already have, which is, I already have alarms going off in here, and I want to be a little bit smarter about what that alarm is and how I should act on it, versus I want to do novel detection on it, right? Or I'm getting logs from my firewall, and I'd like to better understand what's coming across the wall, right? So in terms of the pure technical side, it plays very nicely with most technologies you could come up with, anything that has sort of compatibility with a web services API, right? And then it really comes down to, what are you trying to do with it? What's your use case? What kind of logs do you have available to marry up data with, right? Or what does your case management system look like? And do you have some of the artifacts and technical telemetry when you're responding to an incident that you might like to enrich, if it's the hashes or the IP addresses that you get, and so on, right?
What percentage hopefully this is a generic enough question that your contracting legal teams don't freak out. And I think I'm going to word it correctly.
We'll see.
What is the percentage, right? Do you see that like 70, I'll paraphrase for a minute, 75% of your clients are new and they want to get into this, but we have 25% of our clients, they are really in the mature phase. With it being 2021 and all the digital transformation, are there more new clients, or are you seeing more maturity?
More new clients.
Well, I mean, level, maybe maturity level, like let's go. 2019, you had 1,000 clients, and most of them were at this level. It's now 2021, like Matt talks about, and the quickness and the volume that we've had to work and ingest, even in healthcare. Are you seeing more newbies? Is a better way to put it.
I'll take a shot at it, Kathleen, and then you go. Right. I think that I'll try and answer your question the best way. I think that the fundamental, like foundational use cases have become more consistent over time that we commonly do. And I don't know if that's because it's like the sort of minimum barrier to entry, and that is the I don't want to use basic like that's not fair. It's like the foundational maturity to do it. But it's like detection of your brand oriented, your sort of your brand assets, and some sort of enrichment around the technical data that you have accessible in your existing security products. Like, I just want to know better what this hash is that's sitting here on my network somewhere. Or I just want to know better what this IP address is that's talking to my network. Like, I think that has become much more consistent just in baseline expectations when someone comes to us to buy, right? In terms of the maturity and sort of who gets beyond that, and they're doing, something more where they might sort of run rule sets against their security controls and try and root out specific actors that we might have signatures on, things like that. I think that is still less common. And that like higher.
I'm not surprised. This is my shock face, but it still bums me out a little bit. I was hoping you'd say that you saw a better than average uptake in maturity in this last year. So,
and I think in some ways the fact that there's that, if you asked me a couple of years ago that there's a more common foundational level, is like that's progress. In my opinion, right? Because not everybody needs to go try and root out a nation state in their network. Like, it's just true, right?
It's true. It's true. I'm not. The marketing team doesn't want to hear that, but
no, right? But like there are
honest right now
steps that are more more constructive and more value add, which is to do some of the basic things that relate to your business, most importantly, right? So in short, I feel like I've seen progress in that there are more common. The requirements are more consistent and common, which I think is good in some ways versus people coming at it.
That is a good thing.
Different ways, right? I don't think I answered your question in a good way.
You did in a roundabout safe kind of way. It's okay. I
am representing.
I don't think that like
so I also want to be
mindful of the people that I know over there, like Mara or Alan or anybody's going to be yelling at me. You did. You answered it as best as I hope you could.
Right.
Well, I think one of the reasons behind the question is, as we are, like our organization is really built around education and trying to up level the security teams and so I think we're just kind of curious, and not specifically for us, but just in general, like where is the state of security right now? Sounds like we got a little ways to go.
Sounds like we got a good podcast topic too.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I'll add too, just from kind of what I've seen the last 2.5 years. So I first started off working smaller commercial companies, but actually out in California. So that was interesting, right? Working with a lot of more startups. They do have a higher concentration of tech knowledge. So I got ramped up real quick for API questions and SOAR.
Baptism by fire.
Yeah, exactly. So I've seen commercial clients who've been relatively mature. They have a plan. And now the past 1.5 years or so, I've worked really just all enterprise accounts. So larger, and by larger for us, we mean 4,000 and above. So now I am covering Michigan. I am based in Detroit, but I've covered Canada and Chicago. But even within the enterprise space, there's such a wide variety. I've worked, right, with the most mature teams, and I've worked with teams who are really just implementing. And some of that, I think, does come down to the industry, right? Healthcare is obviously needed to, I think, be further along.
Not enough healthcare systems using threat intelligence. Let's just be honest.
Yeah, ideally there would be more, but I think the idea that they need to be is more further along versus some other industries. So it definitely comes down to the industry as well. If
fair enough. Yeah. Look at Kathleen defending the healthcare industry.
I have no connection to the healthcare. I do work with some healthcare clients though, so maybe I'm thinking of them.
I may or may not know a couple of healthcare.
You might. Yeah.
So you guys have mentioned a couple of times, like knowing what to do with it, or use cases, things like that. I've heard you say. So I guess as like a piggyback to that question, if you're talking with a company that's kind of new to this, they might not know what that is. Is that some of the interaction? And I guess let's expand that a little bit to talk about, and Kathleen, maybe you can talk about like, what is that POV and that pre-sales look like when working with Recorded Future, as far as both understanding what your technology does, but also understanding like how you guys can help and become an integral part of someone's security portfolio?
Yeah, absolutely. So the POV process really is dictated by the client or by the company themselves. I've led POVs where the client had 10 already listed out priority intelligence requirements or PIRs, right? They know exactly what they want. And for me as a former Intel analyst, I was like, yes, I can answer to PIRs. And then there's obviously other companies who they kind of know what they want and what problems they have. So then it's my job to say, hey, from past companies I've worked with, these are their PIRs. I think this would be helpful for you. Does this fit? Yes, if so, right? Always have confirmation on what we're going to test during whether it's an all-day workshop, a 1 week, 2 week, sometimes it could be a 3 or 4 week POV. Really depends on how many use cases. For me, I really enjoy the 2 to 3 week POV, but that's just selfish on my own time. So definitely willing to do some hand-holding if the company hasn't really gone through the process before of actually looking at a similar company. So we do have a lot of pre-built stuff that we can use. And again, just try to make the process as easy as possible.
So then moving forward, POV kind of rolls into production, or is there how much work or change happens to go from like that standpoint to we're going to buy this, now let's move forward into production?
Sometimes it rolls right into production, depending on how fast it goes. And sometimes there's pretty substantial gap between, when Kathleen's working on something and it goes through a procurement process and then it lands on our side, basically. We have a program that we've had in place for a couple of years now, where it basically is a transition point from, say, Kathleen to someone on my side of the fence with customers. We have an onboarding team that the only thing they do at Recorded Future is they project manage like day 0 from customer signing the contract to approximately day 30, when we typically see people get through that first phase. We've agreed on the requirements. We've deployed some initial configuration and some initial alerts and some of how they're going to put it to work. And we really try, actually, as best as ever possible, we try not to conclude that like onboarding phase until customers come back to us and said, I got it. A couple of the things that I initially set out to do, I'm good. I'm happy, seeing value. And we try not to progress past that point until we've gotten that at a minimum sort of verbal that, yeah, initial couple of things that we set out to do or put in place, we're good. Like things are firing, right? And then from there, we have, at a minimum, an annual engagement to customers that are signed up to work with us together as partners for 5 years. And so that's just an ongoing dialogue that happens monthly at a minimum, where we're doing sort of an assessment on how things are progressing. Have your requirements changed? Did you buy a new technology that's going to displace something that you are feeding data into today? And a month from now, we need to make sure that this is working the same or better. So yeah, there's this lengthy ongoing engagement that my team does in a variety of ways to make sure that the requirements are known, understood, they're current. They're not like, we don't get a year and a half in with someone and we're still trying to do the same things that we set out to do before. And they're like, dude, I don't care about that anymore. I do not care. And it means nothing to me anymore. That's a situation we desperately try to, avoid.
Well, I think that's important because while the pre-sales process is obviously critical to understand why I would make that purchase, that is usually a shorter amount of time than the post-sales, I'm now going to own this technology process. So that post-sales part of it in a lot of ways is more important, right? That's where you're actually using it, where you have to show, if I'm making the decision or Anthony's making the decision, right, on a technology and it goes in and a year later, we're not getting any value out of it, that doesn't look good for me or him or anyone that's made that decision. So I think it's, it's definitely a two-way street, right? The customer has to continue to be involved and make sure that they're doing things to do the implementation. But I too often see where that PO gets signed and then it's like, see ya, I'm off to the next customer. And then they lose sight of being an actual partner, right, with a company. So good to hear that you guys are doing that.
Yeah, and one thing I'll just add to that, the partnership aspect is obviously anything we do in the POV with watch lists and with alerts does get transferred over. And then two, we've changed for pre-sales, we are sticking with those same companies we brought on. So it's not just a buy, like any new company, especially Michigan, I've brought on since I'm actually covering the territory I work in, which is crazy, right? Staying on with those same companies because I worked with them already, and it just helps, as you said, facilitate a much easier, post-sales process.
Yeah. The territory thing Kathleen just mentioned is actually, I thought I'll chime in. And reflecting on the question about community too. We have tried, we continue to try as best as ever possible for the folks on my team that are in the field to orient them geographically and have them out in the field there. So maybe one day when we actually have a beer together again, the goal is to have to be able to facilitate that where we have someone up in Minneapolis who can work with our customers in that geography, and we have someone out in San Francisco and up in Seattle, and trying to use that person as kind of a linchpin to the group of customers in that neighborhood. So even if they're not in the same industry, at least they can have some sort of hub for community through us at a minimum, through our individual that's there on the post-sale side.
Yeah. Yep. I think that's good too. All right, guys, I think we learned some stuff today. We learned that
the time already went by. That was fast.
We're almost out of time.
By, doesn't it? It's amazing. Yeah, it's a good the good conversations always go by quickly. But what did we learn? We learned that you can add intelligence to your security. Oh, I like it. See, I took a marketing phrase and I extra marketed it. So
job done.
Good. Might show up on a t-shirt someday. So anyways, fascinating discussion. I really appreciate it. We appreciated you guys being a part of our meetup as well and being part of that threat panel. I think this is every single day right now, I feel like, the four of us are sending the next, oh my God, text message to each other about the next bad thing that's happened. So I feel like adding some intelligence to your security and having some threat intelligence as well is probably a very critical thing. So those of you that are watching, if you are heading down that path of wanting to have some threat intelligence in your organization, talk to the folks at Recorded Future. Great supporters of our efforts here, great technology, and good people too, right? I think we learned that today as well. So, so with that, Chris and Kathleen, I really appreciate you being a part of this. Fellas, as always, good stuff. And we will, subscribe, click the bell, whatever the YouTube stuff is. And
match that button.
The banner come up. Subscribe here.
There, somewhere, yeah. All that fun stuff as well. So with that, we'll see everybody again for episode 22. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks a lot. So fun. Appreciate it.
This was great. Love not sharing my screen.